Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So in today's video, I'm going to show you how to remove and install the Ford Falcon FG Ute headliner. So there are several things that do change on these models, and it's mainly up between the two sun visors in the front center there. There may be an overhead sunglasses console or a dual map lights. That's pretty much all that changes on these models. And in today's video, I'll show you the one with the front map lights only, not the overhead sunglasses console. But they're pretty much the same setup on how to remove them. So with the fabric today, we are using our number 6 light oyster material, which matches perfectly to the original material. So it matches up to the pillars, the grab handles and the sun visors. So if you're after that material, just check the link below in the description. That's where all our fabric and glues and recommendations for all our products that we use will be all there available for you guys as well. As for how many meters you need for just the Ute, you just need 1 meter. And yeah, with all that being said, make sure to like this video and subscribe to this channel to help us grow, and let's get stuck into the video. Okay, we start by reclining the seats to the two front seats as far back as possible. We lay a blanket down, check the lights before we work just to make sure that they're all working and operating correctly. Sometimes they can be quite temperamental and decide to work and not work sometimes. On the center console there is a switch there, you can just turn the lights on and off as well. And I'll just show you guys how much you would need for measurement for these. So usually we sell material at 0.5 meter lengths. So with a Ute we sell them for 1 meter, that's all you would require, and that will include the overhang. You can see here that one was just 1 meter, and I'll show you also the material that you would need for this job. So being a Ford Falcon FG, we would usually use the light oyster, which is the number 6 on our list, and it's a flat knit material. So one thing to note here guys is the original material on these cars can actually fade and also darken over time. That's because the foam behind the material is usually white, and over time the material, the actual foam backing actually starts to change orange and gets all crumbly, and that's what makes them sag. And it can actually change the appearance of the actual material you're replacing. So with our material, we always keep the closest match to the original, and that's what's going to match up nice to your pillars and the sun visors and all the stuff that's left behind. So this one we got in our hand right now, that's an alternative stock, that's called Thorn, but we like to just use the light oyster, which is the number 6 on our eBay sales page, or just check the link below in the description. There will be a bunch of products there and links for you guys to follow. The tools that you would need for this job would be the Phillips head screw. So we have that attached to the screwdriver at the moment, and that's for the sun visors. The grab handles and the sun visor clips are held in by the Torx head T55. So we do usually switch over to those to take those out. So we'd start by taking off the sun visors and then switch that T55 or T25 I mean, and we'll take out the 2 screws of those sun visor clips. And then to pop those sun visor clips down, you can just get behind it with a thin flathead screwdriver and just pop the clips off. Usually they come off quite easily and don't give you too much of a drum. Also with those rear clips at the back there, you just got to get behind the plastic tab with a either an upholstery skewer or a flathead screwdriver. Sometimes the tabs do fall off, but they can just plug back in. Even if they actually fall off the unit itself, it still clips back on. And they were held in by the T25 Torx screw as well. So you get behind the 2 plugs and pop off those 2 location plugs, and then you get behind and pop off the actual interior light. It's not held in by any screws or anything like that. It's just a couple of 4 plugs that you got to get behind the lens itself, or just behind the headlining, and just pop it off. Drop down the seal and then flex the headlining board away from the A pillar. It only goes down maybe an inch or 2, so it's not too much, and gently just flex it away, and then you can just flex the headlining away from that B type of C pillar at the rear there. It's gonna just avoid the headlining resting on the rear view mirror, because you don't want the weight of the headlining to rip down the rear view mirror, so just keep that mindful. And there is a bit of a wiring harness stuck to the headlining board, so it usually starts from the front driver's side A-pillar and runs along the front of the headlining. You've got to peel that away for the headlining board to drop down completely, and then you just unplug the wiring to where it's got to go. Grab that globe at the back, make sure it's turned off, and make sure it actually does stay turned off, because you don't want it to get warm while you rest it down in the floor well, especially if you haven't got any lens cap on it anymore, because you've got to be careful where you lay the interior light so the globe doesn't get warm and burn any of your interior. And then you just go ahead and unplug the wiring. There's also a hands-free little speaker unit most of the time on those Ford Falcon FGs, so you just got to unplug that as well. And now we're going to go ahead and take this one out. It's best to take these ones out on Utes through the front passenger door, that way you can avoid the steering wheel that kind of takes up a lot of space. So with that headlining board out, with Utes you can take the boards out and then take off any sunglasses consoles or the map lights compartment at the front while the board's out of the car completely, because there's you don't need to flex the headlining boards out of the Utes to do this one. So with this job today, we actually have an exchange ready, so we're going to just take off all the components, the plastic components on the old roof lining, take them all off and then reuse them on the exchange board that we brought up. This is going to be the same result, but it just saves the customers waiting around for any recovery stages. So we just take their board away and give them a new exchange one that we've refurbished prior to coming out. Those sunglass consoles or front map light sections get removed by Phillips head screws. There's 4 screws to hold them in. Just be gentle, and we recommend only using a handheld screwdriver, not a powered tool, because they can get quite brittle. A good tip is to spray those little plastic chambers, those 4 screw holes, with a bit of CRC or even some silicone spray or dry lube, and also spray the screws themselves. That way they can glide in nice and easily. If you do have any hairline little fractures on the actual plastic chambers where the screws go, you just use some like a super glue would be fine. Just depending on how damaged they are, you can just use a bit of super glue just to hold the little hairline fractures and the breakages together. But yeah, moving on. So on this one today, there was a slight little breakage on one of those, or a couple of those chambers themselves, so we're just putting just a tad of super glue just to reinforce a bit of strength so they don't get any worse than what they are. So the next step is to install that front map light section, or if you've got the sunglasses console, same thing, just to install it. There'll be 4 screws. You want to locate and line up that console by the middle little tab that comes through. And with this one as well, I do it by hand with the hand screwdriver. Sometimes you got to go backwards to make sure that the screw falls into place. I like to grab the screwdriver down by the base of the screwdriver first, just that way you're not applying too much force and tension for the screw to go through, because you want to just let them to glide through and be nice and easy. You don't want to get them double threaded, because that's what can cause those mounts to break. So with that all done, if you're looking for the process on how to recover a car headlining, just check the link below in the description. We'll have one of our best videos that we've loaded up on YouTube that will guide you through and show you all the steps on how to replace with brand new material and get rid of the old stuff. So we're up to the installation of this vehicle now. We are dealing with a bit of a tight space with this job today, but on a Ute it's all good. So you want to, same as you removed the board, you just want to drop it in through the front driver's passenger side door and just feed it in nicely and lay it on that blanket that we laid down earlier. That way it's not touching the center console. And then you want to position that foam padding that came off the old one, because that just allows you to press those map light buttons without the headlining board moving too much. That's what it's designed for, I believe. So we've got to grab the wiring harness now and just feed it back onto the headlining board. So with this one, you've got the interior light, dome light right at the back there, and then you've also got the map lights you've got to plug back up, and there's a little hands-free microphone clip as well that's got to plug up. When you install that one, just make sure that the speaker's facing down, because if you've got it facing up, it's not going to work that well. And yeah, so just make sure it's facing the correct way, and then you've got to feed in all the wires back to the original positions. Majority of the time you don't need to get them too correct here, as long as they're avoiding any of the screws and the components going back on, because if you were to hit the wiring harness while you're screwing any of those clips back on, the lighting system won't work. It pretty much will blow the fuse because you earth the system. So you just make sure you bypass the rear view mirror while you're lifting that up at the front there, and then you want to feed the rear of the headlining board underneath the C-pillars. That's what's going to hold the headlining board into place. So with the rear C-pillar section under control, you can now just flex the front A-pillar, the actual headlining board underneath the A-pillar now, and then make sure the wiring's tucked under and in position. Also, with the left hand side A-pillar now, it's better off just to probably, if you can reach across, you can do it that way. Otherwise, you can just get out the car and go to the opposite side, because the headlining board is actually all held up now with the being tucked under the rear C-pillar and then one of the A-pillars. It's pretty much holding itself up anyway. So getting out the car, going into the passenger side now, we can just position it properly, feed it as far back as possible, then flex the front of the board underneath the A-pillar. And now we can pretty much position that seal back into location again. So as you've noticed on this job, we didn't have to remove any of the pillars, the A-pillars, the B or C. It's just pretty much just flexing the board away from them, because majority of the time on most cars they only go under a couple of mil or maybe an inch under the pillar itself. Feed that door seal back into where it's got to go, and now we'll start by lining up this headlining board with those rear two clips. Majority of the time it's already going to be positioned perfectly, so you can just push straight up, but you want to go in the center of those clips. You don't want to push those clips up from the edges, because they could break. Line up the interior light there. We'll just push those 4 plugs in. We'll give it a good clean down right at the end of this job anyway. And now we can go ahead and also line up the front now. So you line up the rear by those 2 clips, and then you want to come to the front of this car and then line up the front section with the 2 front sun visor clips. Just make sure the wiring is all seated out of the way. On this car you want to have it running up the front there, down the A-pillar. So with it running out of the way and you can't see the wiring, that way it will allow the screw and the plug to go in nice and free without it hitting any of those cords behind. Clip all those in, check the lights to make sure that they're all operating well, and then you can proceed. That way you know you haven't clipped any of the wiring and all the harnesses all working correctly, because you don't want to get to the end of this job and then find out that the interior lights are not working, and somewhere along the way you have either just pinched one of those wirings and the wiring behind the board and probably earthed out the system. And then even if you change the fuse, it's still going to blow, because there's probably a screw or somewhere where you've pinched the actual wiring itself. Feed in those 2 sun visor screws, the T25s. Just double check that the lights as well, because you just put in a few screws. So we've done the grab handle now. Come to the back, you do those 2 little coat hanger hooks. When you're reinstalling any of these plastic components and say you've recovered the job itself, just make sure that any of those screws that you go in don't grab any loose material that's hanging nearby, because it could snag the material and then just pull the brand new material that you've added and then just do a massive stitching pull, and it could be all game over there. You could might have to remove that job out and then recover it again, or depending on how bad you've grabbed the material. So just be aware when you're installing all these plastic components, just make sure you've done those cuts all nice and correctly and gave yourself enough tolerance and enough room there for the screws to go through without snagging on the material itself. The sun visors are pretty easy to install. Just line the 2 screws up where they got to go, and then just feed one in first. Once again, just making sure you're not going to snag the material as you do it. And yeah, that's almost nearing completion here. So we're just finishing up this one now on the driver's side, making sure that when we do install that sun visor, we're going to avoid the wiring harness that runs up and down the A-pillar and underneath the front edge of the headlining board. That's where most of these wirings do run, so that's where you just got to make sure that you avoid that. And then we're going to check the lights to make sure it all works at the end. And if you want to give this video a good algorithm, make sure you click that like button, leave a comment below, and subscribe to help this channel grow. And also, one last thing, guys, I do invite you to take a scroll through the description below, and that's where we will add any additional content and any updated info regarding what we have gone over to today. And also our latest products and recommendations will be made available there too. And also there's a little donation button there as well, so if you want to feel generous and chuck a few bucks our way for this video content today, you're welcome to do that, and that would be much appreciated. See you on the next video, guys. Catch ya.